Hi guys, great to see you. I've got Leo right beside me. He'll be hanging out kind of. And Charles Latora, great to see you. Hi Mike, right now it's overcast, but it should mostly go away and be high 70s. And Meandering Mike was mentioning that it's partially cloudy over at his place too. Yeah, I want to kind of get right into it pretty quickly and I really want to stay focused. I'm glad I went and made a second pot of coffee because this is 40 minutes long or 38 minutes long of Calandale doing his review of Der Weltkrieg, as well as I want to kind of shut up quickly because Hissy Cat, as far as I know, is going to have a live stream at 11 o'clock. So I thought really make sure that there's enough time in between, for bathroom break or whatever, that type of thing. So I'm not doing the History Heroes this week. And yeah, I'll talk. Well, I'll make a video later on about what's going to happen next week with the live stream or whatever. So just a couple more minutes. Please let me know what you're up to. One thing I am going to really William Arends, super duper great to see you. Hello, Chris. William Arends says, I hope you were not adversely affected by the floods in Ottawa. Interesting that you mentioned that, William Arends, because I didn't realize how much Charles Latroy says he's having breakfast as we speak, or as I speak. Interesting that you mentioned that because I didn't realize how much, obviously I know it's been raining like there's no tomorrow. And I'm going to say this, yesterday, I think it was yesterday morning, I reminded myself probably one of the best $5,000 I ever spent in my entire life was fixing the freaking foundation of this house because it was, I was getting water coming into it. And at the time, it was just one of those things I was like always having to get the shop vac out every time. And anyways, it was this summer, I was like, boy, was that ever money well spent. I could tell you that much. But the way you were saying there, William Arends, about the flooding, no, it's interesting. I'm rather close to the Ottawa River. Like I can walk there in about 30 minutes. But Zoe and Stefan, Zoe is my daughter and Stefan's her husband. They just contacted me yesterday and said, hey, do you want to go for a walk near the river? And I was like, sure. And oh my gosh, we found some wicked apple trees along the thing. Anyways, so we went for a walk. And as you were saying there, I was like, there was pools of water in areas that I normally wouldn't see. And like mini waterfalls, very mini, but it was like, holy smoke. So now that you mentioned it, William Arends, I didn't really click in that, yeah, you're probably right. There's lots of areas must be really bad. And that's also that you're mentioning that along on the far side of the Ottawa River, I normally can see a lot of beach areas and I only saw one. And that's probably due to the fact that it's been a lot, it's high water as well as so much rain that it's probably some of that vegetation is actually encroaching on the sandy beach. Okay, so that's it. Like I said, I'm not going to do a History Heroes thing this week because I want to get straight into it. I've already wasted, not wasted, but I've gobbled up 3 minutes. Darn it. Was there a couple of things? No, not that I can think of, but I am really excited due to the fact that one of the viewers, Meandering Mike, has played Der Weltkrieg. So it'll, during the 40 minutes that Calandale's going to be going, I'm going to be like this, but it's going to be great to also see if you guys pop in some comments on the text bits. Yeah, because I really want to see, and it gets now to this point as well, like I've mentioned, using Der Weltkrieg as a tool to do what I want to do. And it's going to be neat to see where what Calandale is saying is too cumbersome and whatnot, and what other games. Like I was even actually this morning, I was up, I went into BGG and did the advanced search to see if I could find World War I strategic level games to see what other options are. And I've got Imperial Tide upstairs, so I wanted to go take a look at the rules, but it's very card based or something. So I'm not sure if those mechanisms are conducive to what I want to think about, that type of stuff. But I want to get into that type of thinking just to see what other rule systems are out there and see what I can poach, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's it. I'm going to zip over to, I keep thinking I'm missing something, but I don't really think so. So I'm going to zip over quickly to Calandale. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm super excited to see what, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of whatever, but as you've obviously seen in his playthroughs, he bitches and whines often about certain aspects of it, but boy, oh boy, does he ever gets excited, and he's often, thinking about getting flustered, and you could just he was enjoying huge chunks of it. And this is from, I think, someone who's played La Grande Guerre, and he goes on and on and on about that one, and so on and so forth. So, anyways, here we go. I'm going to go and pop it on, present the screen, and away we go. Share the screen. I've got to remember to mute myself, which I shall do in a second. I'll do it now.
All right, Western Front. This is Der Weltkrieg coverage. It's not terribly often that I give up on a game, I think. Well, no, but this was a huge event, and when it came down to it, it really wasn't my kind of game. It's not to say I didn't have fun. There's certainly periods in it that I really enjoyed. But there are other periods where the game dragged, and it felt like all I was doing for months was fiddling pieces back and forth, shifting, and stuff like that. And it really didn't work out too well for me. Too few big decisions, too much effort spent on what were kind of bookkeeping tasks, but all done on counters with counters. Let's go to the components a little bit and talk about them. Get these core displays, and maybe they would have helped me. I find these things kind of make it more difficult for me to assess what's on the map, but I was having a lot of difficulty with that for other reasons. You've got, these are functional turn track displays to keep track of all your supply points, demoralization. It's kind of a shame there's only one combat results table. It would be nice if there were two. Of course, you could photocopy it. There's two different results tables for different times of the year, and the game definitely changes quite significantly with the second one because the results go up by a couple of points. It's enough that you can actually budge people out of the trenches. You've got two rule books that come with this particular one. The standard rules, they're well enough written. And there are issues with them, though, at least in this version. The silver edition that was online for a while tightens things up a little bit, and I think clears up most of the standard rules here. It's a little bit of weirdness about organization that made them hard to find things sometimes, but the standard rules aren't bad. You're talking only 20 pages, some of which are, advertisements for all the different games in the series. So you're only looking at 18 pages of rules. Cut the front page off, call it 17. That's not a very heavy game for the basic rules. Then you come to the scenario booklet. And this is kind of annoying in the sense that, it's very annoying across the board. So it's not just scenarios. It covers specific rules that one would think sometimes are more general than the scenario that you're looking at. Some of them may not apply to all the boxes, to all the fronts, but things like gases, gas warfare, core, tanks, these are going to be showing up, I think, in any front. Maybe not so much the Balkan or the Near Eastern Front or Gallipoli, but You're going to see some of these, I think, on the East Front at all time throughout the game. I would rather have these in the standard rules in one comprehensive location. It's kind of weird to have them here. It's kind of annoying because they're placed kind of scattered. So you've got this little segment of rules, a number of pages after the Schlieffen scenario, which this was originally published as just the Schlieffen plan. Then, after those rules, you've got all the other scenarios set up. Then you've got the duration game, which to me is sort of the grand game, right? Well, this actually contains rules that I think you need for all the other roles. For example, demoralization is in there, I think. Now, it's built in as something of the, as well as reinforcement and replacement points for all the scenarios. And then every scenario uses the same reinforcement order of battle. Now, and then on the back of both the rules charts, there's a terrain effect, or rule booklets, there's a terrain effects chart. Again, that may be something you want to photocopy just to have a copy of it. For the most part, I remembered them, but a couple of cases my memory was incorrect, and I ended up screwing them up. It's not very good at explaining some of the effects of the terrain, but it's a good, a decent resource for looking them up. You almost wish there were some sort of asterisk or something to say, hey, you really want to look this one up. It's a little different from how you think. In particular, the effects that these have. There's no good cheat sheet for things like the progress through time in terms of who can retreat when or who's forced to retreat when. These things are minor. You can certainly make a little scratch pad of a few key notes from the rules to handle that. The worst thing of all in this is the OOB. I swear there are units that never showed up. There are things that didn't exist. And there's also kind of a difficulty in, there are units, like they were Czech units that I don't think I have in my counter mix. I looked for. But there's also this tendency not to give the information that you need. I feel like in order to really play this and enjoy this fully, you need to take this game and study these and cross-reference them and do a lot of homework on your own that the designer should have done to put it into good shape. I don't know if the rest of the series has the same issues, but there is a bit of sloppiness about it. There's also a lack of, this is the much bigger thing, a lack of an ability to really easily access. So for example, if you're playing where you remove specific units, and there's two options on how you do this, either specific units or strength points. Well, you can hunt down the specific unit. That means looking through your entire map sheet for the withdrawal units. I can't imagine many people playing that way for long. I tried for a while, and it was just well beyond me to search through all my units. So then it gets to a point where you don't have, you're trying to withdraw a 6-4 infantry. Great, there are tons of 6-4 infantries. But there are cases where the unit is described as only its strength points. And then you're trying to withdraw a unit without knowing what the original strength was unless you can find the exact designation to indicate that. I think there's better ways of expressing that. You could say, withdraw this unit at strength 3-4, and then parenthetically say what its original base strength is, or whatever. There are a lot of conditions where I basically had to hunt down the unit to try to find out, and then I eventually said the hell with that. So the biggest headache I had in the game had to do with the OOB. The same booklet and its organization with rules kind of stuffed in between scenarios, and the concept, which I kind of ignored, because I didn't see any examples where it had to be paid attention to, which was that there are special rules for the scenarios built into the scenario rules. So as you enter each period in the campaign, you're supposed to be looking up and finding specific rules to the scenarios. Those specific rules didn't seem to apply to the grand campaign, but there is a statement in the rule book that says you should be doing this. Maybe it's just a mistake. The map is one of the things that gets the most attention, because you've got, and you can look at the playthroughs to see the whole thing, but you've got sort of terrain separated by hex sides. And in doing that, it creates a very disconcerting appearance. I've found that when you're actually playing it, it's not too bad. There are a couple of places around the cities and the urban centers that are hard to detect what they are, what they're meant to be. And you can kind of guess at them. In some cases, the urban centers or whatever are covered by the unit in a way that it's difficult to see what the terrain is. But that, again, it's like cities in other games. It often happens. So I don't have too much gripe about the map. That unique hex side terrain gives some neat little options to the defenders, and means that the angle of attack is particularly important. And you can look at the rules explanation to see exactly how that works. But it's not simply every hex side has terrain, but that the defender can defend in the hex, in a particular hex slice's terrain, if you're attacked across that hex slice or side, or one of the adjoining ones. So it gives you more terrain options the more ways you're being attacked from. It's an interesting idea, and it seems to work okay. It does give the map a kaleidoscope look, though, which is a little funny. I don't think any worse than river lines following the hex line, for example. The counters, these are, this is Decision Games normal. Side-mounted counters, I find those annoying. Glossy, I find that annoying. I found that these were particularly prone because of the big stacks. So you lift up a stack and boom, it goes all over the place, and you try to figure out what you have. Tweezers don't help me too much with these. They slip, they clutter, they fall. I was constantly, I've grown out my fingernails a little bit because I was constantly just using my fingers for them. This was just not an easy game, but games with big stacks of counters are often problematic. These are kind of moderately thick, not terribly so. And I just found them very, very difficult to manipulate mechanically, which, given the amount that this game involves searching the entire front for, say, a particular unit or to try to balance your forces or whatever, at least if you're trying to play very competently, these things were a problem. But that's enough, I think, on the components and what you get. I'm going to look a little bit into well, as to the rules, like I mentioned, you want to make sure you get the most modern edition. This is not online and presumably being published. I think they were publishing a big slew of things through Decision Games. You want to make absolutely certain that any of these you get have the silver edition, because there's been changes since then. They're still not perfect, especially the OOBs still seem to have problems. I found some things that seemed a little ambiguous or possibly even wrong. Playing this game, offensives, at least until the terrain gets completely chewed up, don't really feel fixated the way they often were historically. Historically, an offensive was started and generally followed the path it kept hitting. You hit one space, you kept hitting that space. It's fairly easy in this at all times to shift that offensive a space. And it's not terribly hard, especially for the Germans, to shift it quite a great distance. The Germans have tremendous mobility in this. That contradicts some of my understanding of the war, which is that these offensives really did kind of channel into one target. That the defender was almost forced to bring his forces in large numbers to where the offensive was, and the attacker just kept piling in or called it off. It wasn't a matter of, I try to attack here. Now there's an opening here, I attack here. You can also set up a possibility for multiple offensives, attack with one, and if that causes a weakening of the front over on the other one, then launch over there. And I saw a lot of that going on. Again, that didn't feel terribly in conformance with my understanding of the war. I could be mistaken. One of the great objections I had with the board on it was that it's almost a strength point game. You have so much flexibility in terms of moving units around, in terms of shifting. If you have two stacks, you almost certainly can combine, can get whatever strength you want between those two, split between them, right? So if I have 11 strength points in this stack and 3 in this, well, I can probably arrange it so I'm pretty close to 7 in each if I want. However, sometimes that involves calling on other units in other sectors to throw a little bit in. I don't think a lot of the game would be damaged if it were changed to a pure strength point game, and I think play would have been a lot easier. So the fact that you're maintaining these individual specific units, and I understand the desire for that. I always kind of look at strength point games with a little bit of suspicion. Hey, how much of a war game is that really if I only got 6 strength points? I really do understand the desire not to go that route, but this game was too much for me, I think, without that. Now, other people may be happy enough with that because we found that I do not have the absolute tolerance for fiddly games that I once thought I did. Especially once you start getting big stacks of units, because I'm finding myself manually less capable of handling them. Now, one kind of positive thing is the game's coming out on Vassal. However, you do have the Decision Games kind of puts a restriction on it, or SPW does. I'm not sure where that originated, but they pulled the Silver Edition rules off the online version. And you're really, expected to buy now. Of course, you're expected to buy with Vassal anyway. Personally, I would want the physical components of the game, even if I tried playing it on Vassal. I find that probably, not being able to play it physically and playing it on electronic, that wouldn't work well for me at all. But for many players, it probably is sufficient. And it's probably easier to find specific units if you're doing that kind of withdrawal using a Vassal module. Certainly you could mod it to do that. And you wouldn't have these stacking problems, these slippery little Decision Games counters wouldn't go flying all over the place. It also would probably prevent you from breaking the rules the way I like to, which is to say, in order to make the game more manageable to my mind, I do things out of order. But maybe the advantage of Vassal would help them. There's a lot this game doesn't focus on. It takes a very particular view. And in a sense, not focusing on those things, well, it may not be a weakness to the game, but it's stuff that I feel, I'd rather play La Grande Guerre. Because it focuses on the technology advances in detail. It focuses on national will in a manner that feels like it puts the risk of your government collapsing rather than a certainty and a point limit. So this game has a point limit that you have to drive your enemy to. And eventually it came to the point where it was clear to me that the Germans were not going to be able to push the French to that limit before they went over it themselves in my game. I called the game. I wouldn't call it Game of La Grande Guerre ever with certainty that one side or the other would win. I think it's kind of nice to have that slender chance And I think it almost fits World War One because, unlike World War II, say, because you had the French mutinies going on during 17. France was clearly almost out of the war historically. Granted, their armies didn't push forward, but in this game, the reason their armies don't push forward is largely one of, we know how much they can take, and we want to save that and then use it for the final push. In La Grande Guerre, you'd be choosing, yeah, I don't want to use the French, but if I absolutely have to, I'll throw them into an offensive because the chance is slight right now, or whatever, that they'll collapse due to a problem. I just find that that fixed number that you're aiming for and demoralization on your opponent a little bit less exciting and putting you less in the position that, say, the real decision makers would have been in. Hey, yeah, let's push forward. We know the army's weak. We're not going to do it too hard, but yeah, not, hey, I got 600 points left. I can do this much, you know. There also seem to be no rules handling what I did in my game with the channel ports. Someone brought this up to my attention. You know, you got the Germans sweeping the entire Channel coastline. An end run would not have been out of the question. Of course, you can kind of try to excuse that with, you know, if the Germans had that much of the Channel, they had the thing mined, and they could have put their navy into a position to threaten. Who knows? I think that's unlikely. I think the German Navy probably would stay where it was safer. But again, that's sort of outside the scope of this particular game. And that's kind of one of the factors about it. This game takes a view of, if you do everything historically, you'll get historical results. If you branch too far from history, there aren't opportunities necessarily, like invading the ports, to make your opponent pay. There are too many issues left out of the game. And that's along the lines of leaving air power out. Well, you're also kind of, that's no big deal. Air power has sort of this pervasive effect over the battlefield that's fairly limited. But when you question, well, wouldn't the British have been able to dominate those channel ports? And didn't that kind of affect German high command's desire not to push for them deeper in? Probably. All in all, what it reminded me most of was my playing of Anzio, the old Avalon Hill classic. Because in the end, and this is what I said in my intro, this is not a terribly complicated system, although it's got some neat and clever ideas. I like its use of a firepower table, for example. I always hate odds charts. But in terms of the amount of devotion to having the OOB there, the amount of fiddling required to get a hold of that, the fact that there isn't a lot of action going on the whole front for the most part, you know, and that's World War I for you, but as well as the Italian campaign. For the most part, you're looking to get that one little advantage and leverage it. But here you've got such a large scope of a front that it takes a lot of effort to play well. You have to be smoothing out your front as the defender and place your pieces so that the attacker can't find that good place to grab onto, that better place. Because if they find it, they can make their breakthrough. And as the attacker, you're looking at all times, hey, is there some place I can get an advantage? It also comes down to a pure attrition game. You're just trying to increase the body count. It feels like terrain gains don't have the same kind of desirability that I think they did for the actual commanders. The commanders, at times, were trying to break the enemy army's will to survive, certainly from Verdun onward. But before that, terrain was an important consideration, and even after. And the army's morale, the actual army's morale, and demoralization, I don't think really appropriately handles that, went up when they won battles and gained terrain, and it went down if they did not gain terrain. I'm not so sure how much this objective national will might change by that, but it feels like it did. Reports from the front that seemed too sparse were different from detailed reports of a victory, right? The detailed reports of a victory were, sometimes caused great celebration in some of the countries. The demoralization is less a matter of national will or army morale. What it really is modeling, it seems to me, is national economic exhaustion. That may be a separate factor. It's a factor that the campaign game certainly takes into account of terrain a little differently by adding different kind of production hexes. So you have manpower centers and stuff. This game, and I assume any single game in the series, doesn't do that. So you're left with this fixed number that you're going to say, well, if I hurt the enemy enough on this front, and some of it includes terrain and some other little aspects like headquarters and stuff, but most of it is how many guys did you kill? That's an issue. I think it factors in, but I don't feel like it's the end all, and I don't feel like that should necessarily affect the supplies in the same way as it affects manpower. It feels like it's kind of glued together a little wrong. All of which would be okay, because in the end, this is a very, very, very much a game attempting to portray the war as it was fought, and if you play it more or less as it was played out in the war, you will get more or less historical results. If you play it a little differently, you may get some odd results. And they may be odd results that you don't feel fit your model. Now, again, I assume the Grand Campaign may add some things. It may have allowed an end run by the British with that huge channel port system. You lose if you don't spend your supply points. That's a little harsh. I had to cheat to keep myself from losing that on both sides of the war. Overall, I think it does what it wants, what it was designed to do, which was to play out the Schlieffen plan, or to play out, and as this is expanded, one operational segment, one period of, say, 6 months, or maybe even a year of the war. Much more than that, it's pushing credulity, because there's too many open possibilities for things that would go beyond what can be reacted to within the rule set for the full war game of this particular campaign, or this particular box. It's also just too tedious for me to play out the whole war. I don't think I'm going to be pulling this one out again. Although there is this strange desire to get the whole thing, set it up and play it. Because in a sense, I love World War I, and I think this will give the most insight into kind of how the armies actually can operate, can get that grip on the line, can break the line, how a breakthrough worked in World War I, why the armies are retreating. All of this feels like it's in there and really, really well represented. And there is no other game that manages it. There are really very few. There's no monster operational system in World War I except this. So you kind of want to do it just because it is that. Unfortunately, it's got some big minuses towards the way I want to play. So, I don't think I can do that. I think it would be fantastic. Well, I can't remember exactly what I was talking about. Certainly talk about how unique this is. So there are a lot of games that cover the strategic aspect of World War One at various levels. Some of them very, very poorly. Some of them, I think, do a pretty good job. I don't know if anything's perfect. Not really in the comparison of strategic games. Although this is the glimmer of sort of the centerpiece, the system that can be used throughout the strategic system. And there is the campaign to do it. I can't really speak to how that campaign is better or worse. I can project there are going to be differences between what you see in any given operational game scenario or, full war treatment of a small front. And what you're going to see in the campaign game. You can definitely see there's going to be a production choice where, at least you get to choose where you want to send your troops. But I think more than that, because there's this calculation of how much manpower and food and stuff like that, that's all got to be important. So if that's important, there's going to be rules for it, right? Oh, one thing about the map that disturbed me that I want to make sure I highlight was that it's intended to be used for Second World War II. So there are rail hexes that change between the wars, additional rail lines being put in for the World War II map. That was a horrible decision. I don't know. Chances are, by the time the World War II map comes out, it's time to make a new printing anyway. Might as well put the design work in to actually drawing those in at that point. The two maps should have been kept separate. This is not like it's a World War II game being retrofitted back to World War I the way something like Fatal Alliances is. The intention here is this is a full system. Put the extra effort in to put it out. The World War II is going to require completely different counters, etc. People are unlikely to simply buy an expansion kit and expect to use the same map. That's just weird, I think, and causes an additional layer of annoyance. But jumping back, while there are a lot of strategic World War I games, and there's the glimmer of the core system, here, that a strategic overlay will fit on presumably very well, better than just link them all together and the reinforcements come in and maybe you have this right to ship things back and forth. A few small rules could have been added. It looks like there's a full production system, maybe a diplomacy system, all kinds of cool stuff going into it, whatever. I didn't get the chance to look at the silver edition. I was planning on doing it before I did my review, but it's been pulled offline as part of the agreement to put the game on Vassal, just so nobody steals it or whatever. But there are also a few games, a decent number, not a lot. It's not like World War II, but there are a few games that cover specific campaigns, battles even, during World War I. And battles could be a huge segment of the front. They're generally a slice of maybe a couple of turns of this. There may be other games that cover the Schlieffen plan alone. In fact, I know there are. There are games that cover the Kaiserschlacht. But this gives you a chance to slice into an era when there's very, very few games that cover on an operational level of the mid-war period, where really very little is happening. And you can see that was very frustrating for me to play. It may not appeal to many people. There's a reason there aren't a lot of games on that at an operational level. At the strategic level for La Grande Guerre, I love it. But at the operational level even there are drags, but at the operational level, playing that out is probably not what too many gamers want to do. And that's probably shows why you have the Schlieffen plan and the 1918 stuff, and everything in between. There's very few games of. But this is one of the few systems, well, one of the few games, and the whole system is made up of games that give you this, that allow you to investigate and really look at that period, yet you're still getting more conventionally interesting situations. I just think it's a problem that the game doesn't manage to reduce the effort with a few decisions that I think could have made it a much smoother play. Primarily, the OOB needs serious reworking. Someday, I'm sure somebody's going to put out revised OOBs for this that, you know, are very helpful to people wanting to actually play the game, especially the whole thing. But as it stands right now, it's just really, really a tiresome task to figure out what's coming in, what's going out, the way it's laid out, the number of pages it takes up, and months go like this. I mean, a month should take an hour or less unless there's a huge offensive going on, like there was at the beginning and end of the war. Even those huge offensives in the middle of the war tended to only be 1 or 2 attacks. So there's not a lot of time going on in those. However, and a single turn, if nothing's going on, could take 5 minutes, both sides. If it weren't for having to look through the OOB to figure out what's going on, pulling units out, swapping units in that may be the same strength, and really just having to juggle and smooth out your line and do all these calculations to figure out how to do that best so that you can maintain your line in the face of all these withdrawals and arrivals and all this, that, and the other. That all just becomes this humongous effort that drags it out tremendously. But the OOB is the thing that makes them not 5-minute turns. When you have to look up to try to figure out what the hell's going on, when you have to page back and forth to see, oh, how many supply points do I get this turn? When do I get replacement points? Through that same one booklet, that's kind of painful. So overall, you know, the physical mechanical aspects, and even worse, the mental mechanical aspects of this game make it so that for me, it's just not something that I'm liable to see, to try again for the full war. I may be interested in playing a mid-war scenario. Also because it covers the whole front. I'm sure there are other games that do. But the games that I have generally do not, unless they're strategic scope. So this is kind of in that OCS big scale, you know, look at the entire front from an operational point of view. And it does it on one map, you know, for the Western Front. A couple maps for the Eastern Front. Excuse me. Which I think works fairly well. But you've got these huge stacks of counters, which is a negative for me, and a number of other things. So, you know, this is something you're going to have to look through. If it sounds interesting to you, I hope you look through the playthrough, see how it works, and get some feel to make the decision. Because obviously, you know, you can't just rely on my opinion. Some of the things that I disliked about it were purely my personal experience. And things kind of conjoined, you know? So all that mechanical manipulation with those slickery little DG counters flying all over the place just added a level to the hassle. But overall, this was very, very fatiguing for me to do. And too much so for what I was getting out of it to continue, which is an unlikely event for me. However, I do think it's the best game in its, you know, little space in the world. But there is, to my knowledge, nothing else that covers that. It would be, I I think it would be made so much more easy to play mechanically and mentally if it were reduced to a pure strength book. All right, up it goes.
Neato. That's it. I can't believe it. We actually did all the Calandale videos. That's pretty cool. Still have 15 minutes left. I'm just going to go super quick. It's for you, Charles Latora, about the internment thing you were talking about when you were mentioning like how many people did the Americans actually intern in World War I here. I did make a very quick, it's just super quick slide thing here, and I'll pop it up. Add to the stream. There you are. You guys can see that completely. So yeah, Charles, I'm just going to mention you to it quickly. So that it's all about her there, Mrs. Muck, and her husband, Carl Muck, who used to be a former director of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Got into a lot of problems. But the main thing I wanted to mention to you guys about this dude here, what's his name? Hold on, I've got to get his, or did I put it in the wiki thing? Gerard, that's his last name. He's the ambassador to Berlin. And he was part of, I guess, the brouhaha to get really the Americans into wanting to like start thinking about evoking the enemy act or something like that. It was the second time it was evoked from 1798. It was done the first time during War of 1812, and then Woodrow Wilson clicked it in. But this guy here, the government even had to tell him to tone it down. He was starting to say things such as there's like 50,000 German reservists waiting for the the signal kind of stuff. But what I ended up finding out, let's see if I'm going to screw myself over by showing you the nope. Okay, good, Ethan. So that's an old one. We'll just go back to here or go back to her. Actually, we'll just go back to me, so it doesn't really matter. We'll just go very quickly. So yeah, I think it was about it was under 10,000 people, Charles. That 10,000 in total, I think, that were interned. Maybe that's Germans. I'm not entirely sure about that. I did put it in the links of where I got it from. That's from the World War I encyclopedia, online encyclopedia, and I put in the direct link there for the PDF of where I got the information from. What I found, Meandering Mike says, Alien and Sedition Acts. That's it. Perfect. Exactly. That's it. You said it. Yes. Because I've also got that in the links as well, too. Because at first I had it as the Enemy Alien Act or whatever. But that's it. You got it specifically. Thank you. One thing, this is the main thing that I found very interesting about the American approach versus the European approach, which I was reading in that article, was the European approach seemed to target groups primarily. So they were looking at you if you were or whatever, versus the American approach was much more individualistic. So they were actually looking at, okay, you were, you were German born or what have you. You still had to do that. But that's the way the American approach was, which I found quite interesting. They also did intern people. Americans did intern some Germans way the heck out in Panama. And that was the two exclusion zones they had for enemy aliens. The United States was the District of Columbia and the Canal Zone. They also tried to get Panama and was it Peru? No, Panama and Cuba. To also try to intern some Germans. It was I found interestingly that there was more seamen that were interned than land-based civilians or whatever you want to call them. So that was about it. I think that's all I really wanted to mention to you, Charles. It was about under 10,000. I think it was like 2,800 or something from that article for seamen, and some like 2,300. But it was only about something like 8% of all German males of military age were actually interned for a certain period of time, and only 2% of those were interned for the remainder of the war, or something like that, that type of things. And that's it. I just wanted to let you know. Panama Canal was completed in August 1914, so it became very relevant. Okay, thanks for mentioning that as well, Meandering Mike. I didn't know it was at that point. So holy cow, no kidding, it was. All right, so that's it, guys. Thanks. I'll send off a video later and chit chat with you guys and whatnot. But I'm probably going to see or say, virtually say hello to you guys. Some of you on the Hissy Cat Studios playthrough in about 10 minutes. Okay, thanks a lot. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Great to see you. Bye.